Good morning and welcome to Redeemer Lutheran Church. I'm Pastor Gary Lodeholt. It was my favorite committee of the project. Some of you might know that when I was serving the church at the beach, there came a time when we needed to build a new sanctuary. We divided it up into all sorts of committees with different responsibilities. Of course, we had the building committee, which oversaw the whole project. And then we had a kitchen committee for how the new kitchen would be, and an exteriors committee to deal with what things like what the outside would look like, and landscaping and more. But my favorite committee was what we called the interiors committee. It was their job to determine what the inside of the worship space would look like, what the furnishings would be, and how it would all fit together. We designed the altar, the pews, the baptismal font, the stained glass windows, and much, much more. I was amazed at the thought we put into each thing and how we sought to represent things and give glory to God. So I was surprised a bit when I led a Bible study on Exodus and suddenly ran across Bezalel. This week we're looking at Bible people you've never heard of, and today I want to tell you about Bezalel. You find his story in Exodus 36, or rather you find the beginning of his story there. There's a good bit about him in the chapters that follow. You see, at this point, the people of Israel had been freed from slavery in Egypt, and they were wandering in the wilderness, following the pillar of smoke and fire. They had gotten the Ten Commandments already, but there was no place to put them. So God told Moses that they needed to build a tabernacle, which is something like a large tent that could be moved from place to place. Since the people weren't staying in one place yet, they needed a sanctuary that was movable too. And that's where Bezalel comes in. In Exodus 36, verse 1, we read, Bezalel and Oholiab and every skillful one to whom the Lord had given skill and understanding to know how to do any work in the construction of the sanctuary shall work in accordance with all that the Lord has commanded. In other words, Bezalel and his assistant Oholiab were the interiors committee of the very first sanctuary dedicated to the worship of God. They designed and made all the worship furnishings. Bezalel was said to be highly gifted as a workman, showing great skill and originality in engraving precious metals and stones and in wood carving. He was also a master workman, having many apprentices under him whom he instructed in the arts. According to the narrative in Exodus, he was called and endowed by God to direct the construction of the tent of meeting and its sacred furniture, and also to prepare the priest's garments and the oil and incense required for the service. Now, if you were into that kind of thing, there are pretty detailed accounts of how he made the Ark of the Covenant and many other furnishings in Exodus 36 through 39. Sometimes we get to thinking that God calls preachers and prophets and that's about it. But Bezalel reminds us that God calls each of us and gives each of us skills that can be used to God's glory. What's more, when the communion sits on our altar, it is covered with a cloth, and while that cloth has a name all its own, the whole setup is called a tabernacle. In Hebrew, the name tabernacle means dwelling place. In other words, it was the place where God dwelled, where God was, where God could be found. In our tabernacle, God is really present in bread and wine. Prosper, O Lord, the work of our hands to your glory. Thanks for watching, and remember to let this day belong to God.